Hi everyone, I hope you're doing really well. Today we are going to talk about orchids, which hold a special place in my heart. I have several, and I'm sure many of you do as well, so let's get started. So what's interesting is the family of orchids, known as Orchidaceae, is one of two of the largest flowering families of any plants here on Earth. There are over 28,000 species, but believed to be somewhere around 45,000. Most of them are epiphytic, meaning that they live on the side of trees, like our Phalaenopsis or moth orchids that we normally see at our local shops or grocery stores. I have several of those, and I absolutely love them because they will flower and bloom for several months at a time, up to 6 months at a time. In fact, a lot of them will actually rebloom throughout the year, which is really beautiful and a reason why so many people love them. Now, while a majority are epiphytic, there are those that are terrestrial. Terrestrial meaning that, like other plants, they grow in the ground. I have one of those species. It's a Lucidia discolor, and I absolutely love it. It is a jewel orchid, as it's known. I used to have another one that was green and had these beautiful yellow lightning bolt type stripes through it. But unfortunately, I didn't know how to care for it at the time. But this jewel orchid that I have now is absolutely stunning and does it for me. I love the shades of purple in there, the pinks, and that dark burgundy brownish color that comes along with it. Now, orchids are interesting because a lot of people think that as soon as their flowers are gone, that the plant itself is dead, which is not the case. In fact, orchids could live for over a century. So many people are into orchids, and those who are heavy collectors and have been looking at different species and collecting them through the years actually have wills, part of their will, where they leave their orchid to another family member, given the fact that they could live to be over a century. Now, when it comes to orchid care, here's how I care for my orchids. When it comes to watering, which is a big deal, a lot of folks tend to think, because it's often written on those little cards that come along with the orchid, that you should put an ice cube in there once a week, and that'll help keep it saturated, help give it water. But the fact of the matter is that a majority of orchid species live in tropical areas, and they're not used to cold water, and they don't like cold type temperatures when it comes to liquids. So it's not really in the best practice to use an ice cube. I like to take my orchids, and what I do is I take them out of their plastic pot, which has plenty of holes around the side. And as we know, that's because as epiphytes, they have those big roots. They like to collect moisture out in nature, and so they like to breathe a lot as well, and they need that breathable air. So that's why you see them in those plastic pots that have so many holes around the side. But what I like to do is I like to fill up warm, lukewarm water, a bowl of it, and I like to just set my orchid inside there and basically bottom water it, just for the sole purpose of the fact that it's not going to get water into its foliage, because once it gets stuck in there, that can lead to instant root rot, which would kill the plant. So I keep it just kind of sitting in water for about, 10 minutes or so, and then I take it out and I make sure that all of the water that is collected in there is no longer in there, that it has a dry space before I put it back on display. Now, watering is one thing. When it comes to light, a lot of folks think because this is a tropical plant that it wants bright, direct light. That's a big no-no. Orchids, like many other plants, don't like direct sunlight because it'll warm up their foliage and burn it off, and it'll kill the plant as well. So basically, it's good to get in the habit of putting them in an area that has bright, indirect light, meaning that the sun really never touches the plant. That is crucial. Another good tip is also that at night, they like to have the temperature drop a little bit by several degrees. So if you can give your orchid sort of that little cold wave, whether it's through a window or if you have ventilation or air circulation or a fan near it, that is really good too, and that'll help increase its blooming when it decides to flower. So outside of that, when it comes to watering also, one thing that I like to do is add a little bit of fertilizer into my water, just a little smidge of it. That way the plant can collect nutrients because like any other plant, it can't just survive off of water. It needs nutrients to really make it super healthy and to thrive. Now, when I mentioned that portion about liking the temperature to drop a little bit in the evening, it's also important to make sure that there is air movement around your orchid because in the outside environment, they're used to a breeze, but inside, not so much. Air movement will help with the evaporation of water. And it's always best to err on the side of caution with not overwatering your orchids. I tend to water mine maybe once every 7 to 9 days. They are a plant that are used to surviving by dealing with drought type situations. So oftentimes, if you're curious whether or not you should be watering your orchid, it's always best to wait for all of its mixture, that like orchid bark and everything around it is completely dry. Give it a few days if you're not sure, because that will certainly work in your favor. Now, they should never be potted in regular houseplant soil, the dirt type of stuff, because like I said, most are epiphytic. Use a mixture that contains bark or something airy like leca. You can usually find these at your stores, your local like Home Depot or Lowe's. It's something that is incredibly airy because they just need that breathable space like they would have out in nature. Bark chips, orchid bark chips, are certainly the best potting material that you can ask for. Another thing too, a lot of folks like to mist their orchids and mist their houseplants. Do not mist your orchids, because if there isn't any breeze that'll allow for that water to really dry up, it'll pull in between the crown and leaves. And again, like I said, that will lead to crown rot or stem rot, which will lead to an instant death for your orchid. These are such beautiful plants, and they come in such a variety of different colors, different looks, different designs, so many things that you can do with them and decorate around your home. I like having mine on display because it adds a splash of color to all of the green foliage that I have around my home here in Denver. Orchids, for being one of the largest plant families, they grow on every single continent except for Antarctica, which makes sense. But here in Colorado, there are actually a couple species that grow natively. Every so often on certain Facebook groups, I'll see people post pictures once they've run into them. Usually it's in Rocky Mountain National Park, but folks will never give the location, which I'm glad they don't, because then you might have some plant poachers who go after them, which of course we do not want. But again, orchids are absolutely beautiful, and if you feel like they're difficult, just give it some time, get to know the plant, look up some information about it, and you will do great with them, and they will continue to bloom year after year after year and provide you with those stunning and colorful, show-stopping, popping colors that we all love so much. Hey, I just want to thank you guys again for checking out my content, and if you haven't already, please like this video, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel so you can see more fun and interesting planty content just like this. Again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.